Rambam. We're doing the laws of the Nazerite. Actually, concluding today. Chapter 9. Let's get right into it. So a reminder that the Nazarite is someone who took a vow to be a Nazarite, minimum of 30 days, that you would not allowed to drink wine or any derivative of grapes themselves even. Let your hair grow long, and not to impurify yourself with a corpse, like, walking into a cemetery or into a room where there would be. So then chapter 9, the following rules apply when a person sets aside money for the sacrifices of Nazarite. Thank you. So at the end of your time as a Nazarite, you have to bring sacrifices. Interesting. One of the things you have to bring is sin offering. So here it's, why does a person become a Nazarite? Because they want to remove themselves from a world that is depraved, and therefore drinking wine, and sort of like not being so uh, I don't know what if the word is cultured looking, so you let your hair grow long, and all that is to kind of, you want to protect yourself from a unhealthy world. So in the end, I mean, there's a positivity to that, because you're just, it's sort of like, it's like it's like the shikker, the drunk, who says, okay, I need to create a parameter, so I shouldn't become, get drunk, because anytime I touch, any alcohol, right, I get drunk. So you got to create a parameter for yourself, that you won't. So in a sense, that's the idea of that. That's the idea. I'm giving a parody, um, comparison, to it. But whatever. But in the end, you have to bring a sin offering. One of the things you have to is why? Because in the end, God wants us, and that's what's a unique, teachings of the Torah, is that to get close to God is not removing yourself from this world, but on the contrary, consecrating this world and using out the materiality of this world in the service of God to connect to God, right? Not to be disconnected from God. So this person went ahead and did the opposite. He did it with the intent to remain close because he needed to create boundaries for himself. Fine. But in the end, that's not the divine intent, and therefore he brings sacrifices. So now we're talking about that the person set aside monies for the sacrifices, right? So you should bring sacrifices of other Nazarites with those funds. For the remainder of the money is set aside to Nazarite. Other things should be used for Nazarite offerings. So you set aside money, and there's leftover money though, and now the money itself is consecrated for the offerings of the Nazarite. But he set aside, I don't know, $200, and he only needed $170. The $30 are left over, so that should be also used for Nazarite offerings. Could be for another person. If one set aside money for his own Nazarite offering without specifying for which sacrifice it should be used, the money was left over. The remaining funds should be used for a free will offering. So in the first instance, you left it for Nazarite offerings, period, right? Not specifically you. So therefore, it could be used for other Nazarite. But if you only set it aside for you, and what's important over here is obviously intent is, defines a parameter of this money and the usage of that money. And so since here it's only for his own offerings, he set it aside, and there's leftover funds. So now you have to use it for free will offerings. Voluntary burnt offerings sacrifice to embellish the altar. Since the money was set aside to use for his own offerings, it should be used for your offerings. It should not be used for another person. Right. In the previous, since it was set aside without a specification of who would set aside this money for Nazerite offerings, so it could be used for another, right? Now, of course, usually a person would set it aside for themselves because they need it for themselves. So that, the second instance would be but we're giving the parameter of the law. You were specific in your setting it aside that it's only for your benefit of offering. So therefore, the leftover money, which is sanctified and cannot be used for personal purposes, has to be something for the altar. So you bring free will offerings. Okay, when a person set aside money that was designated for the specific purposes for his Nazarite offering, and the money was left over, the remainder of the funds set aside for burnt offerings should be used for burnt offerings. The remainder of the funds to be set aside for a sin offering should be brought to the Dead Sea. So if I set aside a certain money for burnt offering, right? Because you have to bring a burnt offering, you have to bring a sin offering, and a um, and a burnt offering, a scent offering, and a peace offering, if I recall correctly. Yeah, well, yeah, we're going to say that next. And a peace offering, right? So what if I set the money exactly for the burnt offering? So I could then use other burnt offering, because burnt offering means it's completely for God, right? I'm giving the offering, but it's completely for God, right? Now, the problem is if I set the money aside for a sin offering, that's a bit of a problem because I brought my sin offering. Now I can't bring another sin offering. Burnt offering is for the sake of God, just for the for the connection. Burnt offering, a sin offering is for my sin. As I mentioned before, he did a sin. In the end, the final tally, there's a sin over here because he needed to create these parameters, which is Torah gives you the permission to do that, and on the contrary, sometimes you got to do it, but at the same time realize that what you did to create those boundaries that you shouldn't, go beyond and that ultimately that's not the point. In other words, don't call yourself, but as you know, I run a drug crisis center, Chabad Lifeline. Don't you call yourself for the rest of your life a recovering addict. That means like you're always about the boundaries that you're setting. Those boundaries are sometimes, now, should you keep those particular boundaries? I'm not saying not to, but don't define yourself by that. It's just a thought of mine. Which others will argue with me, but that's okay. Because they'll say that way. Me, once an addict, always an addict. Not true. You may get back into addiction. You may have propensity towards addiction because of a personality quality and a a kind of you know um, leaning of the soul towards such a thing, but that doesn't mean that that's what you are. Anyways, that's my own thoughts. So, but the problem with the sin offering over here is you did it. So therefore that money now, you have to throw it away. Remember, because it's consecrated money, you can't have benefit from it. And you set it aside specifically for sin offering. And you brought your sin offering, and this is the leftover money. You got $10 left over, whatever it is, right? It goes to the Dead Sea. Or meaning that you can't have benefit from it. That's the expression, Dead Sea, right? A place where it's impossible to benefit from it. That's the point. So you can bury it or something. And one day someone's going to find a hidden treasure. Okay, the remainder of the funds set aside for a peace offering should be used as a peace offering, right? Remember, it's three different offerings that you're bringing. So then that money should be used for a peace offering because you can bring a lot of peace offerings. The more the merrier. There is no need for the offering to be accompanied by bread. It is eaten for one day. as peace offerings. Okay. Because there was breads that were brought. We're talking about the extra monies now, right? So use the extra money for peace offering, but in these peace offerings, you brought meal offering of breads, different kind of breads that you brought. That's not necessary with the leftover monies, right? Because you fulfilled already your obligation for the Nazerite offerings, but this is leftover money. Okay, the following rules apply when a person set aside money for sacrifices for Nazarite vowed and died. If the money is not designated for specific sacrifice, it should be used for free will offerings. Right, free will, because that's the highest level. Free will means a burnt offering, right? That you freely give, and that's a higher level than because it's completely burnt. So then all that money should be used for that. Some of it was set aside for a also the other for a sin offering, right? And now he doesn't need the sin offering anymore. He died. By the way, death itself is an atonement, right? So there's no sin offering to be brought. But since it wasn't specifically, it was set aside for all the sacrifices, including the sin offering. But since it wasn't specific for the sin offering, so then just use all that money for the goodwill offering, for the free will offering from, right? If the money was designated for specific sacrifices, though, right, the funds set aside for the burnt offering should be used for a burnt offering. The set aside for the sin offering should be brought to the Dead Sea, as we mentioned, and the set aside for the peace offering should be used for a peace offering. It is eaten in one day, and there's no need to bring the offering accompanied by bread, right? So that was similar to what we mentioned earlier, kind of synopsis of everything that we mentioned, right? What is meant by money not designated for a specific sacrifice? For example, Nazarite set aside money to bring his sacrifice and not say anything. He just put aside, okay, this is for my Nazarite, offerings. If, however, you said, this is for my obligation, it's as if they were designated for a specific purpose. Aha, right, because my obligation. So in the first instance, it sounded like he didn't say maybe anything. So there was no something specific. Needless to say that if he says the money is for my burnt offering, sin offering, and peace offering, the money is considered to be set aside for a specific purpose. Okay. Fascinating. Okay, number 5. When a person sets aside an animal with a blemish for a sacrifice, it's as if he set aside money without designating for a specific purpose. Interesting. Why would that be? Since the animal is available for immediate sale, it's considered as if the owner has cash in hand. Uh-huh. Interesting. Okay. Right, because if it has a blemish, so then what it is actually sold by it's sold by the Beta Kabayas, what's the English word? uh, by the temple treasury, right? Because I can't use a blemish animal, so we'll sell it. It's going to sell it at a discount rate because it's blemish. It can't be used as a sacrifice, right? It can be used. So, and there's holiness to it, but by the money that's given. So now that money will then be used for its designated purpose, right? Similarly, if you set aside a slab of silver or of gold or a utensil, it's as if he set aside money without designating for a specific purpose. This applies even if he said that this is my burnt offering, this is not. sin offering and peace offering. That's interesting, right? Not clear on why that is, but so it is. All right. Number 6, when a person says, these funds are for my sin offering and the remainder is for my Nazarite offering. That's interesting. And dies. Or a woman made such a statement and her husband nullified her Nazarite vow. Right, a husband has the right to nullify something of her vows that will affect him in a negative way. The money for the sin offering should be brought to the Dead Sea. Half of the remainder of the money should be used for a burnt offering and half for sin offering. Huh? Why? Oh, I really don't. Oh, by the way, wow. It's a wrong translation. You see, it says here sin offering. And I was thinking, how could you bring it as a sin offering? For who? The person either died or the woman's vow was nullified. So there's no sin offering. That money then would be to the Dead Sea, right? Or you can't have a benefit from it, from that money. But look at the Hebrew. Shlomim. That's a peace offering, not a sin offering. It's a wrong translation. Because this would be incorrect. You couldn't bring it for a sin offering. Wow. Like that's a very obvious mistake. Interesting. Should bring it up to their attention. Take a picture of that for a moment. Sin offering. There. Okay. If he says, these funds are for my burnt offering, and the remainder is for Nazarite offering, and dies, right? So obviously there's no reason to bring the offerings anymore, right? The money for the burnt offering should be used for the burnt offering. The remainder should be used for free will offerings. Okay, like we learned. All right, we're going to stop over here. Although it's Gishmak, but all right, folks, amazing. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Oh, we have a new student here, Raquel. Hi, Raquel. Where are you from, if I may ask?
Florida.
Oh, right. Yeah, right. You were last week with them. Right. I remember.
Thank you, Rabbi.
God bless you.